Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Bookkeeper Radio. I hope you're all surviving the current busy BAS period. So thanks for joining us tonight. No, you're pretty busy at the minute. I'm Kelvin Deere, and as always, joined tonight by Peter Thorp. Evening, mate.
Kia ora, cuz.
Well, Pete, we've got a pretty interesting topic tonight. It's a real hot button for bookkeepers at the moment in the current bookkeeping environment. And that, of course, is taking a bit of a deep dive into the art of selling. The cloud, of course, has brought a number of efficiencies into the bookkeeping game, and that's seen bookkeepers with a need to hone their skills in a range of different areas, as well as offering new services and attracting new clients. Tonight we're joined by specialist sales management consultant Tanya Gray, who's going to share with us some of the key sales and growth strategies that she's learnt in her time as a sales consultant, and in a bit of light-hearted conversation. Tanya, a very good evening to you.
Music. I was dancing away here, so thanks for that. Good. It was taking me back to all my party days.
I don't know if you noticed, but your camera wasn't on mute, so we were watching you dance there. It was really good.
And that I apologise for. It was good, though.
Yeah, very good. Well, Tanya, thank you for joining us. That's absolutely magnificent. You have a perfect pedigree to talk to us tonight about selling, the art or the science, whichever is properly referred to, of selling to win more clients. A little bit about you. You've had over 27 years working with sales management through a range of companies, from big multinationals like Lion Nathan down to lots of small, medium enterprises. You've worked with many of these owners to help them grow their sales. You're a business owner. You've been a consultant for the last 5 years in this space. You've authored a book. You've co-authored and hosted another. You've helped disturb an industry, which I want to know about that in a moment, in the way that they sell. And you've built a sales system for the Australian marketplace, which is you've called pressure-free selling. So that also sounds like an interesting achievement. And your passion, state of passion, is to change the way people feel about selling by changing the way that they actually do sell. So if you can't tell us how to do this, then I don't think anyone can. So thank you. Now, before we jump into
hear all that stuff when you talk about pedigrees and things like that, you know, it's hard to sort of hear back. But yeah, look, I mean, it should be a joy, not a stress. So hopefully we can share some insights on that tonight.
Oh, okay. Actually, before we move forward, can you tell us how you disturbed an industry?
So I was doing some work in the construction industry, which is it's a situation where they import tool parts into the industry, and then they take it to distributors and sell it through distributors. And I was working with a company called the Sheffield Group, and they got me in, and I said, look, you can't keep selling the way that you do. You can't just show up and throw up and talk all about your products. It's time to change, and you really need to bring commercial value to your customers for them to listen to you. Otherwise, you're just another sales rep. So we went through a process of pressure-free selling, and it was so dramatic on the industry that their competitor found out who did the training with them, and they rang me and they said, I understand you did the training with Sheffield. Would you mind doing it with us? Because the customers are talking about Sheffield more than us now, and they're winning business over us. So a whole industry was talking about this change in the method of selling and how pleasant it was to deal with the salespeople then.
Brilliant. Hey, listen, before we jump into tonight's session and some of the bones, Kelvin's going to tell us how people can interact with us tonight.
So if you're new to Bookkeeper Radio, a couple of ways you can join us tonight, and that's with your Q&A box there. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll see question and answer. Just type your questions in there if you hear something that Tanya says and you'd like to know a little bit more about it. We'll get to those questions in around 30 minutes' time after we've had a bit of a discussion with Tanya. Or the other way to join us is, of course, through a live voice call. And to do that, you'll also see a raise your hand button on your screen. So if you want to join us live, you just raise your hand, and we'll make the technology work at this end, hopefully. So that's how you can join us. Pete, do you want to start the discussion?
Yeah, let's get stuck into it. So, Tanya, our more recent industry surveys are telling us two things about selling. What they're telling us is that there's two groups of people very interested in selling. Those that are growing their business, so the early starters, and increasingly over the last, say, 3 years, the vast majority of our bookkeepers are finding that automation has been drying up their traditional core income stream from data entry. So they are trying to plug that gap in one of two ways, either by selling to more customers or coming up with new services to sell to the same customers. But all three of those groups are now far more interested in their selling and marketing processes. So selling is becoming a bit more front of mind, and it came out in the current survey as a very strong driver. Off the back of that, we're finding sales is now their actual selling skills are now under the microscope. Maybe traditionally they could have waited for just organic referral from their existing client base, but they're finding they have to be somewhat more aggressive or somewhat more attuned to their selling and marketing. So we've also found from our members in particular that selling is maybe not something that comes naturally, or perhaps it's something that they need more help in. So why is it that you think bookkeepers might find it difficult to sell?
Look, I don't think bookkeepers are alone. A lot of business owners find it difficult to sell, and let's just understand why that's the case. First of all, it's because we've had one of those bad experiences. So we think selling is like a 4-letter word. As you know, that telemarketer that rings you up at 7 o'clock while you're putting your first mouthful of your favourite meal in your mouth and starts pitching at you, and that's the experience that most people feel a sales experience is like. So they don't want to be like that. The other reason that a lot of people struggle with the concept of selling is that they've tried and failed. And I always like to use a couple of analogies. I remember the very first time I tried to put a nappy on my child. I failed that as well, but you soon become an expert because the consequences are bad. And that's a little bit like selling. It's like driving a car. If you don't master the art of driving the car, the consequences are bad. And selling's much the same. We have to be able to master the skills. But when we go out and try it the very first time, it's uncomfortable, it's clunky, it makes us feel like we're out of our comfort zone, and our mind naturally goes back to that telemarketer. So there's all those negative connotations around it. And probably the third thing that most people feel like is they don't have the skills. And I'm gonna challenge that tonight, because if we can use our ears and listen and use our mouth, then we all can sell. And I want to sort of take us through a couple of everyday examples to illustrate that that's just another version of the sales process, to sort of take some of the stigma away, because selling should feel really good. It should be a nice experience for both you and the person that you're engaging with. It shouldn't be that battle of wits that we see on the Wolf of Wall Street and other programs where you see those dreadful pushy salespeople. That's not what business is about. But business is about having revenue, and unless you've got sales, you don't have revenue.
Listen, by the way, there's nothing wrong with being bad at doing nappies. I failed long enough to not be asked again, and it worked for me.
I think you did it on purpose.
You to my husband.
I hear anyway from your wife.
But look, is it fair to say, from your point of view, that it's not a matter of being genetically wired to be a salesman? This is very much a learned skill, and it's innate in all of us. Is that a fair call?
Oh, absolutely. And as I said, it's just as simple as listening and speaking. So we can all do that, but what comes is all the mindsets around sales, and we sort of got to get over that a little bit. So some of it's, the art of selling, as you said, art or science, the art or the science, the psychology of buying. Yes, sure, that's an art, but nobody expects everybody to be at that stage. And what I find, and I always recommend to my customer, is the business owner, the person who's truly passionate about what they do, is the right person to do the selling. Nobody else should be doing the selling, because you are the one that's wearing your heart on your sleeve. And if you truly have purpose and believe in what you're saying, then that will resonate with the people that are listening.
Wonderful.
Tanya, can we turn our attention to the minute to the target market? So Bookkeepers, very broad industry in you know, the clients that they see. Can you give us a little bit of insight into, if bookkeepers are going out there to market themselves, should they be looking at a scattergun style approach, or should they be really sort of focusing on something that they know how to do?
Okay, so I'll just sort of streamline this a little. People always say to me, where do I start in sales? Well, the first thing you do is you need to identify your target market. And the reason that we need to do that is time is our most limited resource. So if we're going to spend a small amount of our time not bookkeeping but out selling, then we've got to make sure that we use that wisely. So the question is, how do we identify our target market? And you can read all the marketing textbooks, but I just think it's just in front of you. So let's make this easy. So the first thing you've got to do is say, who are my customers now? And then what have they all got in common? And this could be the industry you're working in, the age group, their suburb. It could be a whole series of things, how you got them in the first place. And then I like to ask one more question of the clients that I work with is, what do they have in common with you? Because what people resonate is with people like them. So if you think about friendships, our friends tend to have similar interests and be a similar age and similar energy to us. So if you think about your clients, is there any commonality with you? And once you're able to define that, then you actually know what you're looking for. And I'll give an example. I had a client the other day, and he rang me and said, Tanya, I want to get rid of all my salespeople and replace them with all these young, cheap salespeople straight out of university. And I said, you're selling into schools, so you're selling into 45 to 65-year-old women that tend to have families at home, and you're going to send a 23-year-old pimply-faced child from university. If they don't mirror, then that's can cause some conflict because they don't feel that they understand each other, either the seller or the buyer. So in your situation as a bookkeeper, just look deep inside your target market by looking deep inside your current clients, because the secrets are already there. Mm-hmm. But if you're a new person on the block and you only have maybe 1 or 2 clients, think about what makes you happy when you're working with them and articulate that around demographics and the style of people you like to work with. Do you like autonomy, or do you like them to work side by side? All of these things is what makes it work for you.
It's insightful.
So with that, Tanya, should bookkeepers, I guess, just be blindly accepting any clients that come their way, or should they be a little bit more discerning about, as you say, a suburb? Do they just go door knocking through the suburb, or should they be a little bit more discerning about, who they're looking at through some of those processes around what sort of work am I doing now? How do I target, other people in that industry, etc.? Can you give us some insights on that?
Look, in the beginning, when you don't have any clients, I think there's a bit more of a scattergun approach, and that's fine. But you really will just churn time if you have that approach. So it's more than, to me, it's being a specialist in your field. And it's really making sure, if you've got experience in an industry or understand something that's specific to the clients you're working with, it's easier to replicate that and stand out from the crowd. It's one of the problems that we've got with bookkeepers is that it's a really crowded market and it's really hard to differentiate. And if you can't differentiate, then the client actually doesn't know whether to buy off you either. So that sort of scattergun approach can be really, really difficult for somebody to hang on to, because we want to look for something that resonates with us. So just my recommendation, even if you don't have any clients, decide what you love doing and specialize in that first, and look for people that need that, rather than just having that generic scattergun approach. You just burn time and money doing marketing leads around that. So there's all this discussion about niching, absolutely niche. And I'd like to talk a little bit further about that. And so once you understand your target market, you also have to understand your value. And I think this can be quite challenging for bookkeepers. So I'm going to again give you a few questions to ask yourself. So you just need one client, even if you've just got one client on board. But if you've got a customer base, ask these questions to yourself. What brought them to you in the first place? What made them buy off you in the first place? What was special about you that made them join you? The second question that you need to ask yourself is, now, why do they stay? Is it because your work is phenomenal? Of course it is. Is it because you're truly dependable, or that you work side by side with them? What makes you truly special? And the last part of this, value proposition. So now you've figured out what you do and the relationships and the value you bring. Now you've got to articulate that as a commercial value. And this will really help you stand out from everybody else. So if you're working with, so 9 out of your 10 clients have been with you for 10 plus years, it shows that you're loyal, you continue to do the job, you continue to add value, and you've got a proof point, and we call that commercial value. So after the session, I'm going to share some tools that will help you create your value proposition and help you recognize how you stand out in the market. And this is all about having commercial value, but understanding what makes you tick. And I think if you understand your target market and you understand the value, you're one step closer to making a successful sale.
So once you've got that value mindset or that value proposition set in your head, and you've clearly identified what it is, and you say, I'm going for that market, do you push that value proposition overtly into the marketplace? In other words, does it find its way to your collateral advertising, things like your website and brochures and cards and things? Do you communicate that overtly on printed material as well, or do you keep that to yourself?
No, you say it and spray it, as I like to say.
Yeah.
Because this is what makes you special. And I do an exercise when I'm doing some coaching, and I say to somebody, how many people in the world have got, or in your field have got exactly your experience? And if we start to ask that question, so how many people have your education? Well, there might be quite a few. How many people have had your years of experience? How many people have had your years of work in a certain industry, or in so if you work in a remote environment, so a lot of offices in Australia work very remotely because they've got offices in every state, and that's how the world's moving with technology, but we still need some sort of base. And if you're really good at that level of communication, that makes you special. But if you don't have it congruent across your website, your LinkedIn, your business card, your promotional collateral, then you actually create a level of distrust. And I'll give you a really good example of this, funny example, for me, is I have a girlfriend who has tight ringlety hair, absolutely tight ringlets, and it sits about on her shoulders. And she said to me, I've just had a photo taken for my website, my business card. And I said, well, let me see it. And they had literally straightened every one of those beautiful curls to dead straight. And I said, you can't use that photograph, because if they see that photograph online and then you show up with your mass curls, there's an incongruency and therefore a lack of authenticity. So the minute you contradict any of that, whether it be in your written word or your visual collateral, then people think then your credibility starts to go down and your reliability in your messaging. So people get to a bit of self-doubt. So absolutely. And I know some of the bookkeepers may not have websites. One of the things I'm going to share with you tonight, and I'm just testing it now, so I'm making the assumption that the people that have sold it to me are telling the truth. Through LinkedIn, you can do a one-click solution that literally creates a website for you. So you just fill in the gaps, and then you've also got a live website. You have to pay for a domain name, and you'll have to pay for website hosting. But instead of sending it off for a $2,000 to $5,000 website build, you can basically do it for $20 a month. So I'll share that link with the other tools at the end of this session once I've tested it. So it may take tomorrow or over the weekend, but that will be coming through for your listeners. And that will just save hours of time and make sure that you're getting your right message across. And one thing I must say, one final thing, please never put your LinkedIn profile and not put a photograph of yourself. I know we don't like photographs sometimes, but there's a level of authenticity and trust that's built by putting a visual image online. And if somebody is referring you, which we want them to, and somebody looks you up and the only thing they get is a blank circle with a figurine in it, people find it very hard to identify with you. So please, please don't use selfies. Get a professional photo done and make sure your LinkedIn photo is at least in there.
Wonderful.
Yeah, good advice. Tanya, just in terms of that value proposition that you're just talking about, what are your thoughts on, say, a client satisfaction survey? So bookkeepers who have got existing clients and they're looking to sort of find out, what those clients think about their services, etc. How do you find that as a barometer for the business in terms of the client's happiness and maybe willingness to either refer or buy refer other clients or buy more product from them?
Look, I have two answers to this. I'll give you the pros and the cons, because I have a little bit of a belief around surveys. Because I've got degrees in marketing, and marketing research is one of those parts of the degree. What I find when most people do, so I'll do the cons first. What I find, if most people do those surveys, they don't ask really good questions. So they ask sort of either leading questions or questions that are very hard to use as a measurable barometer. And people get a little bit in the middle range. It's just the standard bell curve for any of those surveys. So I'm not sure you get massive value from them, but it's a great way if you've got a large database. The pros is you've got at least a line in the sand. My recommendation would be talk to your top clients and talk to your bottom clients and ask them the questions of what you're doing right, what you need to improve on, and what else should you be supplying. Those questions alone, face-to-face, will more likely get a better result, or employ an external company to have those conversations, because surveys tend to attract quantitative information rather than qualitative. But they have their place and they give a great barometer and line in the sand. So I'm not discouraging them. Great way to get to your database and communicate with your database. Just be careful that you get somebody professional to help you with the questions, because that's when you get real value.
Terrific. Thanks for that.
Listen, we just got a little question. It's sort of topical to what you just raised about websites, is that, and I've had a lot of conversation with the bookkeepers around redoing websites and what have you, and I've seen plenty, and a lot of them talk about great bank reconciliations and BASs and that sort of stuff, but as you said, it's more than that. Like that's a presumption that that's what's going to be in the box anyway. It's really about why I should be dealing with you, isn't it? So your value proposition, your values. We've had a previous radio guy who talked about the why, why I do what I do, and they're the things that engage, aren't they? So if you have a look at your own website and say, well, why me? Forget what I do. Use the word bookkeeper. They'll presume you do what you do, and all you're really looking to do is get in front of them. So why you do what you do and your value proposition are more important to getting you in front of the person, as I see it. And that got a feedback from someone there that was saying that they're considering canning their website altogether because they're getting no traffic at all, or it doesn't seem to be yielding the sales results.
Look, that's a good question, because maybe the website's not the place for them to get their sales leads. So, and that's a whole nother question that which we'll cover off if you like. Look, a website is, you've got to decide what the purpose of your website is for. Is it for lead generation, or is it an advertisement? I mean, and just a word of warning, my website got hacked and completely destroyed. So I just highly recommend that everybody make sure that the hosting company is actually saving your website, because apparently that's not included.
All right.
I found out by error. So just share that little bit of personal wisdom. And talk about fail. I'm obviously not skilled in that area. That's like changing nappies, right, for you, Pete. But,
no good at it.
Yeah, purposely not good at it. And maybe that's the same with the website. But
so where do we find them? If the website, and I think I agree with you, from what I can see, the website supports your sales endeavours. It can have functional value and all the rest of it. But if we're saying that we open a website and wait for clients to come in, that's not working. And I don't think that's the answer in the main. Where do we find them?
So I'll take a step back there. So let's first of all understand why people buy, and then where to find more people. So you mentioned when you were talking before, when you're talking about value propositions, it's really about the outcome. So let's just cover off that point first. So there's really only 4 reasons that people buy products or services, and that's to save them time, either save them money or make them money, so it's all about money, to keep them out of jail, so that's why we buy insurances, and actually why we buy bookkeepers, because of the ATO, we don't want the ATO chasing us. So, and the other one is to make us look good. So when you're creating value, you must be able to give measurable value. So when you're doing your website, I absolutely agree you should put your personal values, because I call that your heartbeat. So if you don't put your purpose or your why on your website, then you don't have a heartbeat. So you don't show your personality online. But you also have to put testimonials and statistics to prove that you save them time, save them money, keep them out of jail, or make them look good. And you think about what a bookkeeper's doing is that you're taking the chaos out of the business owner's business, giving them more time to work on their business. So you do a really important role. And sometimes it's not a glamorous role, but it's really critical. But if your website doesn't illustrate that, then that's your first, either LinkedIn or your website is often the first place people will go. The next part of the question is, how do we get more leads if the website's not working for us? Look, website, unless you've got a large marketing budget or a high profile in the market, the website traffic tends to just be because you've met people. So just be aware of that. If you've got the budget, go for it. If you're willing to put the effort into building a profile, write some books, stand on stage, be a thought leader, contribute and get things published in magazines and Australian Bookkeepers Network and things like that, then do it. Put that effort in, because that'll make a difference, because you'll drive traffic just because you have more appearances on Google as such. Keeping it really simple here. But if that's not right for you and you don't have the budget, where do you go and find these customers? So you know who you're targeting now and you know what value you bring, but where do you find them? And I always work with customers and say, you find them where it's right for you. So standing up on stage might be right for one person because they really want to make a difference to the industry and really become a thought leader in that space. But for 99% of people, that's their biggest fear in life. So why would you do that? Some people don't even like networking, but networking is a great place to get more opportunities, especially if you've identified your target market. Don't do it unless you have, and make sure you make networking systematic. So you've got to follow through and you know who you're targeting and why you're targeting. The other recommendation I've got around finding other leads is figuring out who's further in the process, like who's before you in the process. So let's go back to babies. I'm right back to babies again. So you think about, you'll never go out and buy a pram unless you're pregnant. But who knows you're pregnant? The obstetrician. So how many obstetricians can you meet to be introduced to sell the pram? It's a simple logical solution. So you've got to think about, where do your target market hang out? And what happens when they are having a crisis? Are they getting a business coach, or are they trying to hire people on Seek and not being able to fill the position? There's lots of communication out there and lots of points that we just need to show up and notice. But if you're not a massive networker, I must recommend the Bookkeepers Network's coffee clubs. I went and attended one myself, and I found it apart from the value that they brought from the technical side, it was a really safe and fun environment. It was very social, and it's a great learning ground. So if you've not done networking and you'd like to experiment how that might work, start with the coffee club. That's a lovely, safe environment. Learn from there, and then take that out to the greater market. So that's where you get your leads. But there's one thing, and I must recommend everyone does that. Tell your clients you're looking for more clients. It fascinates me that lots of people that do regular work for people just don't let the clients know. So the clients just assume everything's ticking along in the background. They have no idea what's going on in your world. So if you just say to them, I'm looking for some more clients, or I've got some space for some more clients, you'll be surprised, because if they've stayed with you for many years and you've delivered them amazing service, that's when they're going to refer. Please don't say, do you have any referrals? That's pressuring selling. But if you say to them, look, I'm looking for some more clients, any idea where I should look? You'll be amazed what comes out of the woodwork if you've done a good job.
It's interesting because our survey consistently tells us that most source of new clients work for bookkeepers is referral. So referral from their existing clients, referral from accountants, from colleagues. So if that's the naturally occurring method, it seems logical to foster, to continue to shake the same tree. It comes with a tacit endorsement.
And it's interesting you say that. It's when we work with clients and we're building a referral into the sales process, because that's very fundamental for repeat business. One of the things I really struggle with and surprises me that how poorly people treat referrals. So I'd just like to talk to the audience about that. When you get a referral, make sure you honour it like a piece of gold.
Yeah.
You know, really treat it with the respect that it needs. Make sure that you follow up with the person that you've been referred to as quickly as possible. And I would say no more than 2 hours, to be honest. That gives you enough time to get your head in the right space, do your research, and then ring. But also make sure you keep the person who's referred you informed of where you are in the progress. I'd send them a nice personal handwritten thank you card, or it might be a scratchy or something like that, but just something to really acknowledge that they've gone out of their way. What I find is people just take it for granted these days, and it's a real blessing. It saves you a fortune, and you're more likely to convert a referred lead by 77%. So I highly recommend encouraging that process.
Okay. Hey, listen, we've had one of our bookkeepers, just on the earlier point you raised, Tanya, about coffee clubs. We had our ABN Coffee Club morning today. Best thing I have done. This is only my third, but I'm so glad I can be around other bookkeepers. So she agrees with you. That's from Paula.
Tanya, we're starting to get a little
Paula.
short on time.
Look, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we talk about the skills you need?
Yeah, I was going to say let's start moving on to that area, because I think that's an important thing for bookkeepers to get their heads around.
Yeah. So one of the things that we talked about in the beginning was, that fear of not having the skills to sell. So I'd just like to take you through a process. Imagine a referral as like your friend's giving you a phone call. A good friend of yours rang you from England and said, look, one of my friends from England is coming to Australia to have a look at the city. Do you mind meeting up and having a cup of coffee with them? In reality, that's exactly the same as a referral. So let's take through the process of a good sales process. It's exactly the same. So if you're going to meet that friend, you might look them up online so you know what their face looks like and who you're going to meet. You're going to prepare yourself by getting yourself properly groomed and turning up on time. That's exactly the same in sales. You're going to have a little bit of banter about what you've got in common, some small talk about your friend, just to build some rapport. And the next thing, if you're doing the right thing by people, you're interested in them by asking them questions. One of the tools that we're going to give you at the end of this session is 10 really good questions to ask in a business-to-business sales situation when you're a bookkeeper. These questions will help you show that you're genuinely interested in the outcomes that the clients are looking for. And that's highly critical. This is where you'll win or lose sales. And this is when you'll win or lose dates, or you'll win or lose friends. The more interested you are in people, the more likely you're going to have a connection. And so if I was to recommend anything, make sure you never speak about yourself until you've had some really good time speaking about them. And then what we do naturally in a conversation where we've connected with somebody, we talk about our mutual things. Now that's the same in a sales situation. We've asked good questions, we've established where there's some gaps and where you might be able to help them. And once you've done that, and only once we've done that, then you might show them how you've helped other people to solve that problem, or how you might go around the process of helping them out. It's exactly the same. I suppose the final part, the final two things in sales, which most people would find most daunting, is objections or objection handling and closing. What we know when you use a non-pressuring sales process and you show genuine interest in the client by asking really good questions and really listening, you get very few objections. And objections tend to come when they don't see the value. But if you've mastered your value proposition, you truly understand what you deliver, then there shouldn't be that gap. And the final part of closing, there's only one way I would recommend to close, and that's how would you like to move forward from here? I don't believe in all those tricky techniques of trying to get them to say yes and give them, do you want to start Monday or Wednesday? That people see through that garbage these days. Just ask, how would you like to move forward from here? So I hope those steps, and we will go through those steps online, but they're very simple steps, just the same the way you make friends. So when you go out and see your potentially new clients, consider that you're seeing a friend that your friends asked you to see from England. It'll change your whole mindset around it. But one of the things we haven't covered, and have we got time?
Yeah, keep going, Tanya, absolutely.
Have we got time?
Yeah, yep.
There's, whoops. Let me just bear with me. Oh, see, I've got too many things open on my desktop here. And I can't find it there. One of the things I did some research on today, and we're not going to worry about that, so I can't find it, is that bookkeepers have so many different services. One of the things we haven't really talked about is selling more to the same clients. My recommendation is on your website, make sure you show all your services. You'd be surprised how many people put on their website, we do all these, you know, what I would call grand statements, but they actually don't note down everything you do. And one of the questions that you could ask your clients is, you know, I'm putting together this brochure and these are all the things you can do. Were you aware of what we did? Or can you have a look at this and see if I've sort of got it all right? You'll be amazed what your clients perceive you do and what you actually do. So there's huge opportunities around how many services the bookkeepers can do. And I think sometimes we get trapped in our own world and we speak our own language and we forget to stop and say, what else would the clients be saying? And how can we list absolutely everything you do? So I remember doing this. It was actually in a networking group. I did this exercise right back 5 years ago when I started my own business. And I was amazed that I did 27 services for clients, where on my website I literally had 5. But I had 27. So I had 5 main ones, but I provided a list of all my services on my website from that point onwards. So,
and Tanya, just on that concept of marketing more services to more clients, like where existing clients aren't aware of that, you know, should you be quite proactive and then starting to push that out there through, you know, either conversation, brochure, because they're not probably going to be going back to your website, are they? They're an existing client, but you know, should you be having those conversations in the first instance?
Look, when you meet with them, one of the things that I find more useful than too many brochures and that sort of thing is a little bit of storytelling. You know, everyone likes a good story. So if you can tell a story and position your other services that they're not using in the story, that's a really light touch. You're still selling, but it doesn't sound like selling. And so tell some stories about what other things that you're doing with clients and what the outcomes have been. But also one of the things that we always do with a client is we create a model. You know, we'll write circle with all the services, or, you know, 2 pillars, the 5 pillars, or whatever the model looks like. And if you create a model, you can easily illustrate all your services on the back of your business cards, on the back of your front page of any written material. So I think it should be everywhere. But just tell stories. Don't try to pitch at them. So we do this and we do this. Did you know we did this? Because people will get a fight or flight response. So make it really authentic, make it conversational, tell some stories, help them, clients that you know that there's opportunity, help them to design your model or your brochure. Bring them into the conversation. Don't pitch at them. That would be my recommendation. And please let everybody know what you do all of the time.
Yeah, that's great advice. All right, look, we're probably getting to the point of the session where it's opening the lines up to listeners. So if you've got a question that you'd like to ask of Tanya, then either type it into the Q&A box on your screen there. We'll filter those at these end and ask Tanya on your behalf. Or if you'd like to come on live, then hit the raise your hand button and we'll bring you on to ask a question of Tanya. We might get the session underway, Tanya, while a couple of bookkeepers are typing things in. But one of the things that bookkeepers often say to us is that they get asked by prospective new clients, how much does it cost? And cost sometimes can be a bit of a tricky subject. How do you respond to that from a sales perspective?
We, as a sales perspective, we try not to have that conversation until we've presented value. But it's sometimes difficult because if they're shopping around, if they're shopping around on price, they're probably not the customer you want anyway, to be perfectly honest, because there's always somebody that will do it cheaper. And this is really understanding your value. What I would do if somebody said, so how much is it going to cost? I would say, so can I just understand what your situation is? So the first thing I'd say was, thanks for letting me know you're interested in the cost of this product. Understand what is you're looking for, how much time you're currently in, and if we took it away, what would that be worth to you? It's a whole different conversation because there's no longer talking about cost. I would never address the cost question early on. You need to establish value and you need to build trust before you deal with cost. So I would thank them and then ask them a question of, so what were you hoping to pay, if you really want to address them straight up, but never ever respond immediately. Because there's two rationales around this. Because you haven't established value, therefore they perceive that you're going to be cheap. And we don't want to sell our services for nothing because there's no value in that. And secondly, sometimes it's their filter and really they're not genuinely interested, because if they are genuinely interested, they'll answer your questions. So it can be a little bit of a pre-qualifier, and actually you pre-qualify them out of the sales conversation. It's
also a matter of scope too, isn't it? You can't, if you're sitting in front of a builder and you say, look, how much is my house going to cost to build? Well, it's going to depend on a few things. What's included in the scope of works. So
that's a really bad example. Don't they give you a price and then they add another 20% along the way?
Yeah. So you really can't have the conversation, can you? Until you understand scope, till they understand value. And as you said, if it's price and they're there for a shop, then sometimes you just have to say, can't help you.
And look, and if you can't bring value and you can't give return, then it's expensive for them. But if you can bring value and you can bring return, then it's not expensive for them. So you can't ascertain whether there is any value until we've asked questions. So thank them for asking you that question. Always thank people, because it takes the heat out of because it's really just it's either a smokescreen or an objection. In some ways, I would consider if it's early on in the conversation, it's a smokescreen. If it's later on in the conversation, it's an objection around your value. Yeah. And again, it's about asking great questions and then matching your question, the answers of those questions to your value.
Because once you get to the heart of why they're there in front of you, then that's the sale, isn't it? If you understand what problem that they've got that you're trying to solve, or what they haven't got that you could bring to the table, once you can show that you can do that, then price becomes somewhat irrelevant to a point. Yeah. And I always put, if I get that conversation early, I'll always push it off and say, look, we've got to get to understanding a lot more about you before we can work out what it's going to cost, because we don't know. Because
it's not a kit set, right? It's not a cookie cutter solution. So you just can't do that. It's really interesting that comes up so often. But price, it's what they're willing to pay to solve their problems, and it depends how big the pain is for them. So if it truly is a big pain, they'll pay the money. And one of the questions that I always, and this will be in the follow-ups from here, but one of the questions I always encourage people to ask is, what's happening in your world that led you to agree to meet with me today, or led you to ask for a referral? Because it's that question in itself will tell you all the clues that you need. So let me just say that again. So if you've been referred to somebody, look, I'd love to understand what what led you to be talking to so-and-so and asking for a referral? Because it's that moment, what's changed in their world or become so difficult in their world that they now need to take action. And the next question you ask, why now? Why haven't you dealt with this before? Because that's the pain. So the questions are, why have you agreed to meet? Said very nicely. And then why now? Why has it become such a problem for you now that you've escalated as a priority in your business? And those two questions alone will unpack so many secrets in the conversation. And then you'll be able to say, look, if it's we're in chaos or we're losing money or we're miles behind to do our bath or whatever it is, if that's the problems, you can solve that. And you can take their pain away and you can make their life easy and you can free up their time and you can save the money or make the money. But those two questions alone will find out that. So if you even just ask those two questions, the money value question will disappear.
Yeah.
Not 100%, because some people do it naturally.
Yeah.
Tanya, we've got an interesting one here from Joanne where she says, interesting to hear your thoughts about that pricing being not a cookie cutter problem, but many businesses these days are looking at fixed fee pricing. And just your thoughts on that fixed fee approach as actually a marketing objective.
Absolutely. I was doing a bit of research for today, and I was listening to one of the previous, just a small section of one of the previous Bookkeepers radio, and there was a whole session on value pricing, and I think that's probably worth going back and having a look at that. When we price solutions rather than hours, which we want to discourage against, it gives us a chance to automate or outsource to a lesser resource. So it'll free up our time to bring in more clients. At the end of the day, as long as a client can see return on their investment, pricing should be what makes you feel comfortable. Now, I know your industry tends to work a lot around the hourly, but it's really, again, around the value that you can bring. So I think that there's a specialty Bookkeepers radio, and you Pete and Kelvin, you can probably direct the answer to that more around that value pricing to that session. Do you remember?
Yeah, look, we've run a couple on it. One was a spectacular session only quite recently, and we had a small technical issue which failed, where we failed to record. But the two people behind it are exponents of fixed and value pricing, and have some really good views, and they're kindly consented to come back and do it again, which we're going to record it next week, and that'll be available. And they are two wise, sage people who are exponents of it, and they're quite clear on the difference. There's a difference between fixed fee and value pricing. I mean, everyone thinks it's the same thing, but there's quite a distinct difference. And a fixed fee could be as simple as just a capped hourly rate, which is not what it should be. It's got to work backwards from your marketing, and so that the client appreciates the value that's being offered. Then you can talk the fixed fee. But that's a session that's absolutely worth listening to. So
and it's specifically for bookkeepers, if I remembered correctly.
It is.
So my experiences in sales, and I've got experience across bookkeepers, but they were absolute specialists in that space. So I'm going to direct, and we'll put a note, I think, when that link comes up into the notes. I'm going to direct that to the expert. You know, we can't all be experts on everything, and I think they address that better and know your industry better. So I'm going to throw that one to the keeper.
They are the experts, because that's Trent McLaren, who was Thorp Leader of the Year, and Di Lucas, who was Bookkeeper of the Year. So if they don't know, then no one does. So they're well credentialed to talk about it. And we've got one more question here from Samuel about Facebook advertising. Do you have a view on it?
Yes, I have a view on it. Look, again, marketing, that's a space around marketing, but look, Facebook advertising works really well if you know your avatar. If you've done your target market and you're really clear on it, it can work really well. So I would highly recommend you use a marketing expert and you don't do it yourself, or ring Google. I did a session with Google maybe 3 weeks ago now, and it's completely free for small businesses in Australia. You can ring them and they will do your keyword for your advertising. And there's this thing called negative keywords, which I'd never heard of until that session. And which actually helps reduce traffic to your ad that's not appropriate. So you're not getting people click on your ad and it's costing you money.
Yeah.
And that they've got no interest. And it might be because your product's called the Paris shop. And so every time somebody Googles going to Paris, you get all of their information, which is not what you want. So Google offers a free service. I recommend everybody should ring them. They are straight onto it and they're extraordinarily helpful, and they will not let you come off the phone until they've solved your problem or done the best job. So best free service available for small business right now. And they will, obviously they want the advertising to go through.
Of course.
And that's all part of it, but it's also making sure your business is being listed and getting reviews and all that sort of thing as well. So they will help you from a Facebook point of view and a Google listing point of view.
Oh, terrific. Tanya, we're getting close to time. You mentioned at the start of the session that you had a couple of checklists and other templates. Did you want to do sort of any sharing of that now, or would you rather us sort of do that at our end through links? What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is for everybody that registered for the Bookkeepers Radio tonight, I'm going to send out a couple of worksheets for you. So some of the things that we've talked about, like defining your target market, is a bit of a worksheet that you can work through, and this will just help get it out of your head and down onto a piece of paper and make it clear for you. And these are the worksheets that we use with clients to do exactly this exercise so that we can build a sales strategy that brings results quickly. So step one will be how to define your target market, and there's a whole bunch of questions that you just need to fill in. And then the next one will be, so we'll give you a bit of time to do that, and then we'll send out the next one, which will be about building your value proposition. There'll be a lot of examples and lots of just fill in the boxes so that you can articulate something really special. And just to add a little bit of extra value, we're going to send out those 10 questions. 10 questions that will drive better conversations with bookkeepers to business owners. And the final thing, assuming my experiment with this one-click website goes absolutely brilliantly, then I'll be sending the link to that as well. And that's just literally takes your LinkedIn page and builds a website. You've got to add a few bits and pieces and put some information in there, but otherwise it all happens for you. So if that, and I'm 3/4 of the way through, but I haven't published it yet. So as soon as I've done that, if that works, we'll also share that. So there'll be 3 worksheets coming for you, and then that link if it works.
All right, terrific.
We'll
be in touch and work out how to deliver those.
We've got everyone's contact details, so we'll circulate from here.
Yep.
And thanks to you too, and thanks to the listeners for listening, and make sure we don't put any pressure on that sale. Enjoy it.
Yeah. No, good advice. Very good advice. All right. Well, look, that brings us to another end of another Bookkeeper Radio session. Again, thank you, Tanya, very much for your pearls of wisdom and insight into the sales and marketing process tonight. We very much value your thoughts, and great to have you with us tonight on Bookkeeper Radio.
Tanya, one last question. It's just flashed up. What's the name of your book?
Sales Teams That Shine.
Sales Teams That Shine.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So I've actually I've got 2 books, but that one I wrote completely myself, and the other one I was the host author.
Wonderful.
Very good. Thank you for that.
Thanks again for your time.
All right. Excellent. Thanks again, Tanya. Next Bookkeeper Radio, 2 weeks' time, where Tim Reed, the CEO of MYOB, is going to join us and have a bit of a chat about all things going on in MYOB space. So please join us again in a fortnight's time, and have a very good evening, and thanks for joining us. Good night.
Good night, all. Thanks, Tanya.
Bye.
Thanks, Tanya.